obviously, it's that time of the week. I wanted to bring a special human onto the show because that's how we roll, and it's James Williams. If you have not heard about him, he's a certified high-performance coach, and he specializes in what he calls the business of you. He's worked with so many successful businesswomen all over the world, including his credible wife, Emily, who we'll have on the show, and she and him are all about creating a successful and thriving life from the inside out. So today we're going to talk a little bit about reinvention, leadership, how to really step into who you want to be. And I mean, if I'm, fully candid with everyone here, James popped on to Zoom with me here and he said, "How are you?" And I was like, "Great." And then I was like, "Well, I'm kind of drowning, but I'm good." And so I feel like all of us are doing our very best to be who we want to be and not lose ourselves along the way.
Okay.
And I think far too often we create things and suddenly we're totally somebody else. So how do we keep that North Star? How do we choose it? All those things. So James, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure. And I feel you, right?
Yeah.
It's those that dare to go big and be the best versions of themselves. We go through those times, right? And I think that anyone that says that they aren't going through those times is holding stuff back, right?
Yeah.
I think the misconception with, and I'm using air quotes here, which my speaking coach will kill me for. Anyone that says that when you're successful, whatever that means, or you're thriving and things are happening and you're creating. If you're not going through times of struggle, then you're really not trying to live up to your best. And really, it's how do I honor the struggle? How do I say, okay, this is part of it, right?
Yeah.
As Ed Milet would say, we chose the roller coaster and not the merry-go-round.
Yeah.
Right? And that roller coaster has some pretty scary dips and loops and things, and we can just accept it and roll with it and say, this is okay. I'm meant to feel a bit drowning right now, and I know I'll get out of it, and it'll be all good.
I wonder who came up with that, because my dad used to tell me that when I was a little girl, and it really made a mark on me.
Really? Yeah. I don't know, but it's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and those of you who don't know, I mean, like the roller coaster obviously is implied as entrepreneurship, merry-go-round being in like a stable, whatever that means, job.
Yeah, predictable. Same thing, right? And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But if you're the person that's on the merry-go-round and you're complaining that my life's boring, it's not fair, all these other people are doing these great things, why is my life? If you're on the merry-go-round and you're feeling like that, you're not meant to be on the merry-go-round.
And it's interesting, right? It's like pick your poison, because then you can be on the roller coaster of entrepreneurship. And it's funny, I had my e-course business for so many years, and I got to a place where I was dialed in. I had my team, everything was working the way it's supposed to. And then obviously as things change, it's kind of like, I have a startup now, and I totally forgot when I was out lunching with my friends and having a team that was perfect, what it means to really build a business. I forgot. It just had been so long. Last time I built it, I was in like my late 20s, early 20s. And I was like totally willing to just bleed and work like a crazy person. So, now I'm 37 years old this week. It's like I am not in a place to be able to just put myself into the ground like that, nor should anybody really have to. But I think a lot of people start things because of the idea that they have about what it is. And then as they start to get to know what it is, there's so much more going on. Like I know you and Emily run an online business, and you guys have started with that. And it's like the start and the feeling of starting something is so enlivening. But then the maintain is like a totally different life commitment. Like, can you tell us a little bit about like, how do people choose to start things that really do fuel the soul of who they are and feel like the right path for them?
I read a really great quote the other day from a really good friend of mine and Emily's called Dr. James Rouse, who, if you don't know him, look him up. And he said, you'll know it's your purpose if it brings you peace. And the reason that I think that's really important is that when something is purposeful, whether that be a career or, any kind of pursuit, your ability to work hard and be fueled for that thing is so much greater. Right? Now, as ambitious people, sometimes I really admire those that are very easily satisfied. Because as ambitious people, we're always seeing the next thing and the next idea. And it's, oh, I can do this. And like you said, you start it and then it's like, oh, yes, this is what's meant to happen. But if we always come back to our purpose, why am I doing this? Like, what is this? How is this journey adding something to the legacy? When we find that and find that path, we know at some point all the bits that are uncomfortable a lot, they can be delegated. They can be. Maybe not right now, but anyone can go through hardship for a short period of time, knowing that there's a beginning and end to that, that at some point you can delegate off and it still be your purpose. So I think it really comes back to purpose, and that comes back to knowing yourself very, very well, to know that I've become very body sensitive now and spiritually sensitive now, to the point where if something isn't in alignment, I know very quickly. And I'm very quick to say, okay, this is either going to go or it's going to change. And that's how we maintain.
And
obviously, it's not as simple as that, but that's the short answer.
Yeah. Okay. So I know that a lot of people listening right now, and this has been kind of the crux of my works for so long, is they don't know what their gift is and they feel kind of intimidated by having to figure that out. And reinvention, the thing about life, I think, is that we're just in transition nonstop. Like, people don't even realize there is no there. People say it, but I don't think there's so many personal development people where we say a soundbite, but we don't really explain what that means. Like, there is no there. To me, that means like we are always in transition. Even when we think we're going to hit a goal, there's like other parts of us that are in transition. And so like, when somebody's getting to the root of not just who they are, but who they want to become, what are some things that you help clients do to kind of make that choice? Or maybe there's modalities like meditation, play medicine, I don't know. But I personally, like, for example, my TEDx Talk business, Wise Whisper Agency, I'm totally in love with what we're doing. I'm even more in love with the idea of what we're doing. I love the idea of writing the most powerful talks for the most powerful people and having the most powerful impact that way through words, right? Words is my skill set. Writing is my thing, right? So this is the highest form of writing I could think of. And I'm also a creative that likes to close out things. And so it's perfect for me. I get to write a 10 to 15 minute talk, close it out, next client, close it out. I don't like holding on to creative projects too long. It doesn't work for my creative brain. Maybe that's a story. Maybe that's the truth. I don't know. That's just what I'm shooting for here. But the practice of having my business is, we have 10 speechwriters, 4 creative directors, 6 people on the booking team. It's like a full-blown operation, and then an account manager and people quitting, people starting, right? It's like a whole thing. The practice of what I'm doing is so different than the idea of what I'm doing. And I realized early into this business, I'm going to have a CEO take over for me, because I'm not going to be very happy if I'm the CEO forever.
Right.
And that ownership is super freeing, but I know a lot of people don't feel that sense of solution. They don't feel like, oh, I know what I need to do with this. So for anybody who's at that impasse right now listening, and they need to go inward and really say, who do I want to be? What's my next move? How do I stay true to myself? What are some tactical things that you recommend that they do to kind of get more connected?
Sure. Well, I call this seasons, right? So I feel like through our life, we have many seasons, right? Yeah. What is very important, now I'm a data guy, right? I love data because I like information that can be used. If it's all just thoughts and ideas and fluff, I can't use that in my next season, right? Yeah. So the first thing I do is kind of some of the stuff we've been talking about already. We really need to get to know who you are. And I'll run you through the idea of the business of you and how that works, because even in your TED Talk, you talked about the importance of doing a self-audit, right? And that's kind of what the business of you is. So in any business, we have roles. Yeah. And so the idea of the business of you is to come up with a structure that during each season, we are managing the team that is the business of you. And we're gaining data, right? So that even during that season, we're aiming to improve, or we're aiming to get closer to the truest expression of our purpose and who we are, how we're doing it. So that when the next season comes, we're more prepared to do that even better and better and better. So by the time the last season comes, we get it pretty good. We do it pretty well, right? We're never going to be perfect. We're never going to be there. And it really starts with, I think, the most important role in anyone's business of them or in anyone's business is what I call the non-judgmental observer.
Right.
This role is very important because one of the reasons it's very hard for people to look at themselves, especially what they have done wrong or what their weaknesses are, it can feel like a judgment. It can feel like, I started this thing and I don't want to do it because it feels hard. Or I don't like managing people, but I'm supposed to manage people. And we get all these judgments and harsh opinions. So we either don't want to look at it or we look at it with a negative view. If the non-judgmental observer is looking at it and is just speaking facts, we'll say, okay, what am I doing right now that is serving me and how I feel and how productive I am and how much the world is getting to see the best version of me? What are those things? And you write them down.
Mm-hmm.
I know we could do this career specific or life specific. And then you have to answer the opposite question, which is, well, what are some of the things I'm doing that, if I'm honest, aren't serving me? Maybe they're distraction techniques. Maybe they're behaviors, right? Maybe my mood isn't always consistent and I take it out on other people and it's because of X, Y, and Z. And we really need to use that self-audit to come up with as much information as possible that we can use. And ultimately what it comes down to then is you realize there's a ton of habits, behaviors, experiences, people that do not need to be in your life. And, I first experienced this when I left 12 years in TV. I worked in TV for 12 years.
Wow.
When I left that career, I got rid of maybe 80% of everything. Parts of me, people, areas of my life experiences. I got rid of 80% of it because that's how much I didn't need to do what I'm doing now. And my core belief is that even without all the other roles, which we might not have time to go into all of them, that observer is going to give you a lot of information, if you're brave enough to go there, about how much energy you're putting into things that has no ROI at all. And a lot of them are up here. That's where I'd start.
That's what you're sharing is so interesting because, I feel like when my plate has a lot of space on it, it's hard for me to notice where I'm being overly lenient to who has space in my life. And I mean that in the most kind way possible because it's not like people don't deserve space in anybody's life. It's just we're not all fits for each other. And that's just a fact. And it's been interesting. My plate is so full right now. I'm working about 50 to 70 hours a week because I'm hiring team to replace myself in so many areas. And I just can't get it done fast enough. It's been like this for 8 months. And I plan on cutting my work week in half, but I'm not there yet. And the stress of that has made it crystal clear for me to need to cut time elsewhere, right? And it's been so interesting for me to be in conversations with people and realize oh, you're great, but I just don't think I want to be friends. And it's not that you don't deserve my friendship or I don't deserve yours. It's just this isn't doing something for me. And it's almost like in business, we can feel let's say the person listening right now, they're in corporate. We can feel who is making the environment lighter, not just because of their mood or their energy, but because they're doing lifts, they're grabbing work off of plates. We live in a world where so many people will tell you what the problem is or why something can't get done versus the person that's let me go figure it out. It's such a rare, special person, but we all feel that person in the work environment, right? And I feel that as an entrepreneur, I can feel when we hire somebody and I feel things coming off of me versus something about that person feels like more is coming back onto me. And so it's been really, really eye-opening for me to reimagine how I spend my time with friends. And when I get more honest with myself, it's oh, wow, there's only 3 or 4 people in LA that I really love that really feel like my energy's lightening with them. And everybody else I enjoy, but I need a lightener at this time, in season. And my standards have changed. So for people who maybe are listening to us now and they're oh, wow, if I get really honest, this isn't so great. where do you suggest that they begin reimagining their life, you know?
So one of the concepts I use with my clients is called the 3 rooms. It's kind of a meditation practice that I came up to help myself because, growing up, I was a very creative kid. And so my brain was all over the place. It's just a million miles an hour, lucid dreaming every night, sleepwalking. So I had to come up with something to really master the past, the present, and the future so that I could find agency and find focus and not make those rooms wrong. Okay.
Yes.
And so the way it works is you've got the past habitual library, everything I've ever done all the way up to 2 seconds ago, and the future creative workshop, everything I want to do and the things in there and the present. And the reason these are rooms, and the reason this is an important conversation for what we're talking about now, is that especially when I'm in a season like you are, where I'm at this point of a new venture that is not quite where I know it can be, and it's overwhelming. If I know the truth, which is that there is no negative emotion in the present moment, there just isn't. Anything negative or overwhelming is in another room. It's either based on something that did happen or based on something that could happen, but it's not in this room. And so by mastering the ability to shut those doors and be in the present room, I get peace. So from a performance perspective, sitting in peace, real peace, even for 5 minutes, has a massive impact on my nervous system and on my ability to go back to the task at hand and do a really good job. There's a great strategy that I use called Pomodoro Technique. You've probably heard of the Pomodoro Technique, right? Same kind of thing. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's delegating a short period of time, maybe 20 minutes to work, and then you have to take a section of time off. And the idea is that when you're working, you're optimal, you're at your best, and you don't wait for that to dissipate before you take a break. You finish when you're still at your best, you take a break, you refuel mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally, then you go back to it. This means that because you're working at your most optimal when you're working, you can actually get more done in less time, make less mistakes, so on and so forth. So when we're in a place where things are overwhelming and you're trying to figure out yourself, you're trying to figure out your future, it's really important to understand you can't make decisions about anything when you're in that stressed state, right? The Navy SEALs had a saying, which is you can't make decisions in the darkness, which means that when you're in a fight or flight stress state, the decisions aren't going to be great. So when you're feeling like that, get in that room, in that present room, and shut those doors to the past and the future. And if anyone wants this, it's a free, you can go to my website or it's on YouTube. I'll make sure that Ashley sends you the link. It's free. It's just a meditation. You shut those doors and just for a minute, give yourself permission to be completely disconnected to anything else other than this moment, knowing that you're going to recalibrate and then come back to it. And just take it a day at a time. Big leaps are made from many, many, small movements. And so, if you're very ambitious and you take on a lot, as you do as well, Ashley, you're a superstar. I mean, the amount of things you've created. And it's great that you're vulnerable enough to say that you feel this way too, because I think that's something that isn't done enough. Just because you're successful doesn't mean you're this person who's always happy and not stressed.
Oh my God.
We all get stressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And we all need help and we all need to speak it out, all of us. So even if you're at the very beginning, you're not going to escape that in, a few years when you're successful. It's going to be there. And that's okay. And know that in the present moment, you can avoid any pain.
A couple of things that come up is just like around the word leadership. Like I love that you have all this experience in like peak performance and leadership, because one thing that I've been wondering over and over again is I'm like, what does it mean to be a good leader? Like we are expected to be, the caliber of clients coming in for TEDx talks written and booked. It's like, we have a couple historic figures that are like some of the biggest figures, families we've learned about in history in elementary school that were writing their families' TEDx talks. And it's like, I'm writing for these people and I'm thinking, how do I do this? Like, I want to be likable, but I need to have boundaries, because if they creep on scope and they ask for things that I didn't agree to in my contract, I need to protect my team. I need to push back. My speech writers, how do I give them honest feedback and not sugarcoat it because I really need them to get what I'm saying? And then how do I check my ego at the door and not think that I'm the one that knows best either? And then how do I pay everybody, but the business needs to be able to afford to exist? Like, the amount of things that we need to learn, I would say usually my resting state is pretty sunny. Do you know Sam Skelly, by the way, James? Are you friends with Sam?
I know Sam.
Yeah.
Not that well.
Okay. So her and I are really good friends, and I don't know why she just came up for me. She's just a very sunny person. Her resting state is like pretty freaking happy. Mine too. I think that's what we connect on. We're both around 95% sunny, and then 5% the clouds come in just like any human has, right? I feel like lately, no matter how much I love what I'm doing, I'm probably 80% sunny, which is like pretty good. It doesn't mean 1 out of 5 days a week I'm like cloudy and sad, but I would say there's like 1 or 2 hours of the day that are stressful, and then the rest is really exciting and great. And I'm really feeling it. So looking at my normal resting state and looking at the struggle to be who I want to be and to figure out who that is and how to show up. I know you've coached a lot of leaders on performance, and a lot of performance happens in the mind, as much as it happens in our health, right? Like, you know, I just ate a fettuccine Alfredo the other night. I felt like I was hungover, hit by a car the next morning. Like, my performance is out the window. So it's like performance can mean so many things. How do you, I don't know, what are some lessons you've learned and about what it really means to be a leader, how to really show up and inspire people?
Yeah. Well, isn't it great that you can really be honest about being 90% happy or 95% happy is great. And that even though the stats are still good, it's a bit like your Aura ring, right? You're used to having a certain score. And even if it's still good, if it's not you, you feel it. That tells me that you're really self-aware, which is one great, attribute of a great leader, is being self-aware. But everything you just said, all the things you listed off, how do I do this? How do I do that? All of those roles, you also play in the business of you. A great leader can only lead others as well as they lead themselves, right? Somebody who shows up and is more of a dictator and a micromanager, that's going on inside their heads for themselves. 100%, right? So if you know how to show up and be honest with yourself without ego and say, Ashley, if you're honest today, you went into this situation, you didn't think about the people in the room, you went into this situation still thinking about that problem that happened earlier on and ended up taking out on the team. If you can be that honest with yourself then and lead yourself into observing in a non-judgmental way your behaviors, your actions, your choices, then that just translates to how you then go into the world. Like, great leaders are great internal leaders, right? They're examples. It's less about what they do or what they say and more about how they show up.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what I've seen to be true. Great leaders don't really need to say much.
Yeah.
They just need to be, very much in integrity, and they need to understand what that means. And a team describing a great leader will describe just that. They'll be like, this guy or this woman, they're consistent. Right? You can trust that you can trust who's going to show up that day. You can trust that they're going to give you the right kind of support. That even if they don't quite believe or understand why you're making these choices, at least they're going to be that non-judgmental observer and be curious and say, I'm curious as to why you've made that choice before I judge it as good or bad. Right? They're with others the way they are with themselves. That's why they're happier people with higher bandwidth. And it's why great leaders also have great relationships. Because when they're not with their team and they're with, say, their wife or their husband or their daughter or their son, they're there, right? They're present because they're not scared of, what might I miss if I'm not thinking about work? So that's in one of those doors, right? They can use those doors very efficiently. And so leadership is, if you ask me, leadership is a state of the way you express, the way you lead yourself.
I love that. And I feel like that's something I'm still honing and growing, especially you shared a lot about presence. I think the question kind of becomes like, what's keeping us from presence? Like, if presence is so important, why can't we just do it?
Really?
And I know that that's about having control over your attention. And a lot of your attention is controlled by fear. Like if you're afraid of something, you're going to go pay attention to something. I've never really talked like this. This is just thoughts that I'm having from what you're saying. But, when it comes to fear, I think there's so many of us that are living with it. And it's just a matter of where it sits in the house, right? Like, is it right next to us? Is it in our ear? Where's our little fear frenemy hanging out? How do you manage your own fear, and how do you help clients really tackle it? Because one thing, I've come up with is it's called the truth test, where if I'm afraid of something, I'm like, should I allow myself to be afraid of this? Is this a feedback thing? Like in my business, like for example, the booking team, we have pretty much 100% success, and we've gotten more than 1,200 people booked on stage for TEDx. So, at the beginning, I was like, can they really book the client? Like, that's so scary, right? Like, what if we write these talks and they can't get them booked, and then I have to refund all these people? That's horrible, right? But then I had to do a truth test. Like, I really talked to my booking team that I brought in-house and said, how many times have you not been able to book someone? Tell me the scenario about that person. Like, yeah, they're pretty much at 100% success. But it's like the fear is in me of like, can I fulfill on this? Can I give people what I'm promising? And having to fact check that. I know that that's a term in dialectical behavioral therapy, fact checking the facts. So I don't know, what are some tools that you've given people to help them regulate their fear? Because I know that's probably a huge energy that keeps you from leadership.
Yeah, huge. Well, fear, I'm a big advocate for perspective and simplification. I think perspective is everything, right? You could live the exact same life you're living now and feel completely different about it.
Yeah.
Because if that wasn't true, it would mean that your life is so unique, no one else on the whole planet has got anything like your life, which we know is not true, right? So perspective is everything. And also, honestly, I don't think fear is a bad thing at all. Fear is a human emotion. Why would we deny a human emotion? But perspective on that fear is big, and where we sit in it. And so there are actually four main fears, right? Within performance studies, there are four main fears.
Tell us.
Yes. Right. So the first one is, let me just make sure I don't miss these actually. But the four main ones, the first one is fear of ruin. And that's not like failure. That's fear of like something that I do is going to result in the absolute ruin of my life. Everything will be lost and unredeemable. Right?
I know that fear so well. Yeah.
That's a genuine fear. It's that you will be responsible for making a decision that collapses your universe, right? And that extreme. That's one, really important fear. The next one, which is probably the most obvious one for other people, is rejection. That you will do something and people will reject you for it. Think about the beginnings of our journey. I'm sure it's the same for you, right? You made a choice to do something and everyone thought you were crazy. And some people actually made it very clear that if you do that thing, they're not going to be your friend anymore. And then on the professional side, you went and asked a question of someone, would you mind looking at this or working with me on this? And they just said, no, you're not good enough, right? So rejection. The third one is regret. If I do this, what if I do this? And then I look back and I'm like, oh my God, I've ruined my life and I'm going to regret it. That you'll get to the end of your life and you've made these choices and it was all for the wrong reason and now you're going to regret it. Okay? And then the last one is the most interesting one, and that's the fear of responsibility. You've heard of the fear of success. A lot of people are scared of success. The fear of responsibility is like, well, if I build this startup, I'm responsible for all of it. I'm responsible for the staff. I'm responsible for paying their families. I'm responsible. So all of these fears are real. But at the same time, okay, yes, the answer is yes. Yes, you're responsible. Yes, you could have regret. Yes, you theoretically could ruin your life. And yes, you could be rejected. And then what? The is it that important to you to do this or not? Because the perspective is, what are you going to be focusing on in the movement here? Because if something's that important that you're going to come up with all these fears, which in my view is really just a spotlight. All a fear is your nervous system is being tempted towards a direction that it's never felt before. So it's like, well, I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm going to throw things at you, energy, which will turn into thoughts to hold you back and keep you where you are. Because our bodies are designed to keep us safe and comfortable. But our annoying human minds wants us to evolve, which means going into areas and parts of the forest that we've never been to before.
Yeah, it's interesting. How have I never heard of these 4 fears and they all resonate? I was actually gulping. I feel like there's one of them that, like, I felt like a cartoon when you were just giving those 4. I felt my gulp.
Which one?
It was the first one, which was fear of ruining everything, right?
Oh, yeah,
and then it was fear of responsibility too. I literally just...
This is from the High Performance Academy. These are like academically studied. It sounds 4 things, but they're so accurate. They're so big. Well, I'd say let's play a fun game for your listeners then. I'll give them a little gift.
Okay,
let's do ruin. And I'm going to ask you 3 questions, and everyone listening can listen to these questions and answer these questions for yourself. Okay, this is right off of one of my session forms. Okay, so around ruin, I'm going to read it to you.
Okay.
We often fear that our mistakes will lead to catastrophic ruin. We think, if I start this new business dream of mine, I'll go bankrupt and I'll never be able to recover and be poor for life. Thoughts like these are almost absurd when you consider the fact that we can learn and adjust and adapt and change. So all future actions can be different. You won't be ruined, you'll just get better because you'll learn. If you choose to learn, there's a big if, right? It's if you choose to learn. So the first question for everyone listening is actually less of a question, it's more of a continued sentence. So I'm going to start the sentence, so you've got to finish it. Sometimes I think my life will be totally ruined if I...
God, so blocked. Sometimes I think my life will be totally...
And what would be great, if anyone's listening to this, why don't you post the answers underneath this video?
Yeah.
This podcast episode, so that Ashley gets some feedback. So sometimes I think my whole life will be ruined if I... So common answers to this have been things like, if I leave the job that I actually don't want to be working in and go all in on this entrepreneurial career, I'm going to ruin it. Who the hell do I think I am to do this? That's a common one.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's also just like if I like scale my business, that's one of it. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The next question is, if I stopped thinking failure was permanent, then I'd be more likely to
scale my business.
Hey! If I thought about gain versus ruin more often, a dream that would get me super motivated is...
Oh my God, now I'm just in the same one, James. I'm like, scale my business.
So there's 2 things that really quickly, that's really important to you.
Yeah.
And the fear is just that you're trying something big and your nervous system doesn't know it. And it's not used to that because you've done so many big things and you've been through a lot of big things in your life. It thinks that nothing's going to ever make you feel scared again. But now you're trying something big and you're just unfamiliar with that feeling because you're a tough woman.
Yeah.
And this is another opportunity to become even tougher and learn even more. And the gain is way greater than the ruin. There's Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy have got a great book out right now, The Gap and the Gain. Yeah. Read that book. Everyone listening, read that book. Because that's what this is all about, this question, right? That if I could invent a machine that could really look at the thoughts that we have and how many of those thoughts actually have ROI.
Yeah.
It would be a bit like your happiness cloudy percentage. It'd be like 95% would be useless thoughts.
Yeah.
Maybe more. Like those gain thoughts, you think of the energy and the smiles and the happiness that comes from the gain.
Yeah.
And you get yourself into that state very, very often, you're less likely going to make the mistakes that lead to ruin because you're going to make great decisions and you'll bounce back and you won't be bothered by mistakes. And it's like, okay, that failed. Let's try the next thing. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. So funny to listen to you kind of give this fill in the blank for everybody, and to even out myself on my own podcast, as I always do. I've always been the sacrificial lamb of my own show. It's like,
It's
why
because
not?
that's the sign of someone very strong. Like,
Thank you.
vulnerability is such a superpower. And that's another thing I want your listeners to understand. It's like, we are all, me included, Emily included, we are all going through it.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes those things are really hard and sometimes they're less hard.
Yeah.
But that's life. Nothing grows strong without adversity. Adversity is a wonderful thing. It's how we get strong and tough. And that's how we really appreciate the things that we have in our life that are beautiful and fulfilling,
It's so true. I'm writing a speech right now for one of our TEDx clients, and I was talking in the speech about how, because that's the funny thing about being a speech writing house, is that we have all these brilliant people, but then we infuse our own selves into their talk. And so I was infusing my own little 2 cents in somebody's talk about vulnerability and how courageous it is to have hope when you've been let down. Like, think about like people who are dating. It's like, if they've been totally sideswiped by somebody, the vulnerability of saying, I have enough hope to keep going and to try again. It's like, it's so much easier to take yourself out of the game to not hope for better. I love those optimists out there that are like, no, but there has to be better for me. I believe that there's better.
Yeah.
They're just the best, and the world needs them so bad.
World does need them bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so what have I not asked you about leadership, a self-discovery, or reinvention that we should make sure everybody knows before we go?
There's one question you could ask me. Well,
Yeah.
I'll ask myself out loud.
Yeah, let's do it.
Why do I believe that putting other people first is selfish?
Yes. Give me it.
So that core belief started from being the young kid who didn't like school in the way that my sister, who thrived academically. School didn't work for me, right? I did terribly in my exams. I was the really intelligent kid who, for some reason, didn't do well in exams. So I got my love and my attention from being nice to people and doing things with people. And, as a young adult, learned very quickly that using other people to feel good about myself, there was 2 things wrong with that. One was that when I'm helping people or being there for people, I'm not giving them my best because I haven't had the opportunity. I'm giving myself the opportunity to become like this.
Yes.
So they're getting this depleted version, helping them out, right? Which isn't fair on them because A, they're not getting the right help they need, and B, they're being used by me to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
And so as as I've worked with a lot of amazing women, I've worked with guys as well, but I've worked with a lot of amazing women with mum guilt and, lots of guilt around, I should be a better mother or a better wife or a better friend, because those amazing business women out there are very generous with their emotions. Unlike a lot of the guys that I've coached, they just find the emotion less easy to express. Whereas my wife, I would say to Emily, she's very emotionally generous. And so I learn a lot about the guilt that it's about. Yeah. And, so I would always come at that and I'd say, well, do you think your daughter that you don't want to, you don't want to start off your career with because you want to always be there for your daughter, say? Yeah. I'll say to them, do you think that your daughter needs the best possible mother that she deserves? And I'll be like, of course she does. Okay, so why are you giving her this depleted version of yourself then? Mm. And then it's like, so if you put yourself first, even for 10 minutes in the morning, before you went and saw your daughter, do you think she'd get a slightly better version of you that day? Do you think that then she would, she'd see a woman and know how to be a woman? Because she's modeling you right now. Right? Our kids are modeling us as adults. And if we're self-sacrificing, thinking it's for them, we're teaching the next generation that self-sacrifice and not looking after yourself is somehow honorable. That's why putting yourself first is selfish, because to be of service, you've got to be strong and capable of the unexpected outside of the day-to-day. doesn't mean only thinking of yourself. It means putting yourself first so that you can be all you can be for those that you love and serve. That's what it is. And that's probably the thing I believe in most in what I do. It's the most important thing.
I love that so much. It's been so wonderful to have you on. And I know you'd mentioned like a guide. We'll put that in the show notes. Where can everybody find you and keep learning from you best?
So my website is thegrowthedge.com, and I spend most of my time on LinkedIn, and it's James R.S. Williams.
That's so good. I'm so jealous that you got The Growth Edge as a domain name. That is so great. Okay, everybody, be free to check James out and all he's doing. I hope me processing all my little fears over here were helpful to you processing your own too. And until next week on the Utah podcast.